For most of human history, going back over tens of thousands of years, almost everyone was extremely poor. Up until about 200 years ago, around 80% of the world's population lived in extreme poverty. Today, that number is down to less than 10%. At the same time, in the developed world, the average life expectancy went up from around 30 to 75. The child mortality went down from a high number of 1 in 4 to less than 1 in 200, and the average height went up from about 5'6" to 5'10". How did this happen? Progress is clearly not automatic, it is an exception in human history. So, how do we keep this going? How do we prevent stagnation or collapse? One big part of this puzzle is in understanding this relationship between higher levels of freedom and prosperity. By freedom here, I do not mean those empty promises of free food and free healthcare that we hear about all the time. I mean the legal protection of each person and their private property against plunder, which is the initiation of violence or fraud by other people. And prosperity refers to an abundance of life-enriching goods and services. The other big part of this puzzle lies in understanding this relationship between higher levels of prosperity and higher levels of flourishing. Flourishing here is being measured by the Human Development Index, which is an aggregate measure of a long and healthy life, literacy, and standard of living. So, what might explain this high degree of correlation between freedom from plunder and prosperity? To answer that, let's examine all the ways in which one could obtain wealth. The first is self-sufficiency, that is to produce everything yourself. This is inefficient and leads to being trapped in poverty. The second way is pleading or charity. This is to receive someone else's property through their voluntary generosity. Here, wealth is only transferred, not created. Before charity can even be an option, wealth needs to be created. The third way is through plunder or stealing it. That is to take someone else's property without their consent. Here as well, wealth is only transferred, not created. Also, plunder, when unpunished, discourages future wealth production because the producer do not get to keep the reward of their production. Finally, there is specialization and trade. That is, you produce what you are better at and you trade it for things that you need from others who are better at producing those things. This is the only interaction that is by mutual consent to mutual benefit. It is win-win. So both plunder and self-sufficiency lead to lower productivity, which leads to poverty. Only freedom and a culture that appreciates trade over conquest or isolation enables prosperity for all through specialization and trade. Again, by freedom I mean the recognition of private property ownership through legal protection against plunder and the absence of trade barriers, which are also a type of plunder. So we've talked about how specialization in trade makes us better at producing valuable goods and services. But what makes something valuable? Well, a thing doesn't become valuable simply because of the effort that went into making it. Rather, different things are valuable to different people in different amounts because of the preferences or priorities of those people. So in this world with billions of people, all of them with their own preferences and priorities, how do societies calculate what to produce, how to produce, and how much of it to produce? This is known as the calculation problem. The billions of interactions between people all across the globe solve the calculation problem in a way that no central authority possibly could. A price of a commodity isn't just a random number assigned to it. Rather, prices communicate information and incentives to both producers and consumers of a commodity in a distributed manner without the need of any central authority. For instance, suppose that due to an upcoming exam season, there is a higher demand for pencils. This leads to an increase in the price of pencils because more people want to buy pencils. This increase in the price of pencils sends a signal to both the producers and consumers, which is implicitly as follows. To the producer, it implicitly says, pencils are in short supply and need more production. So if you make and sell more pencils now, you'll benefit by making more profit, and society will benefit because their demand of wanting pencils will be met. At the same time, a signal is sent to consumers which is implicitly as follows. Pencils are in short supply and need to be conserved. So if you don't really need a pencil right now, and if you don't buy a pencil right now, you will benefit in the form of higher savings when you buy a pencil later when it's cheaper. At the same time, society will benefit because the people who really do want a pencil right now will have one available at the store. So observe that both the producers and consumers are motivated only by their self-interest, yet what they do is also socially beneficial. There is a harmony of interests between all people. In this way, the profit and loss based system helps supply track changes in demand. The more distorted this price signal is through plunder and trade barriers, the less accurate the price signals, and so the greater the gap between the supply and demand of that commodity, which leads to shortages and surpluses, which is a wastage. This system is beautifully captured by Adam Smith in his quote that it is not from the benevolence of the butcher, the brewer, or the baker that we expect our dinner, but from the regard to their own interest. The economist Ludwig von Mises explained that no centrally planned economy can solve the calculation problem because of its rejection of private property. This argument can be summarized as follows. Without private property, there can be no specialization and trade, because before you trade something, you need to own it. Without trade, there can be no prices, because price isn't just a random number you can assign to thing, it emerges from the supply and demand of that commodity. Without prices, supply cannot track changes in demand. When this happens, production decisions are made in the dark, and this leads to mass shortages, starvation, and deaths. Okay, based on this understanding of calculation problem, we can a little more formally define the terms capitalism and socialism. Capitalism is a political system in which the only legitimate purpose of a government is to protect people and their property against the use of force and fraud by others, including members of the government itself. So basically being anti-plunder. This at a high level translates to the big branches of government being the courts, the military, and the police. Socialism, on the other hand, is a political system that rejects private ownership of the means of production, that is, of the goods that are used to produce other goods, such as factories, machinery, and so forth. So it is a system of universal legalized plunder, which is the same as saying that there is no private property. A question now arises is, do we necessarily need to pick between pure capitalism or pure socialism? How about a middle ground between the two? Well, a middle ground between no legal plunder and universal plunder is neither possible nor desirable because it is an unsteady state that progressively leads to universal plunder. Plunder harms everyone. When Peter is robbed to pay Paul, both of them are discouraged from future production. Peter because his productivity is punished and Paul because his plunder is rewarded. Plunder, if unpunished, encourages or breeds more plunder until it harms everyone. So the simple rule for anyone who cares about human freedom, prosperity, and flourishing is do not steal, do not ask the government to steal on your behalf, and expect your government to make all plunder illegal and remove all trade barriers. That is to make all trade based on mutual consent legal. Naturally, a lot more needs to be said before one may be fully convinced of this thesis. However, a question that probably arises in your mind is, why should you be bothered about this issue at all? Why can't economists take care of this just as professionals of all disciplines take care of their discipline? After all, we just talked about specialization and trade. Here's why. Experts may not be honest due to real or perceived conflicts of interests between them or the politicians that they represent and the rest of the people. Even if they offer honest advice to politicians, politicians can only pass policies that have popular support. Otherwise, those politicians are eventually voted out of office and the unpopular policies are reversed or repealed. Laws tend to reflect popular demand, but they affect all of us. If the popular demand mistakenly or otherwise supports harmful policies, everyone suffers and this stalls human progress. So what can you do? Well, the silent majority never achieves anything. So learn to use your voice effectively and respectfully. Seek to learn more, ask questions, share this with others and discuss. Subscribe to my channel for more content. You can like, comment and share this video with your friends and family if you want this video to reach more people. Also, you can also check out the long form video on this same topic. Thank you.